On an ordinary afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the streets of Los Angeles, James Carter, a quiet and composed man, was driving home after a tiring day at work. Moving leisurely, suddenly the flashing blue and red lights of a police car appeared in the rearview mirror, signaling a traffic stop. There was nothing unusual about this situation, except for one important detail. The police officer who stepped out of the car had no idea who he was facing, and the decision he made would determine the future of both him and James. David Thomas felt a wave of discomfort rise in his chest as his tire went flat in the middle of the quiet road. He had been through countless stressful situations, from back-to-back meetings in luxurious boardrooms to tense negotiations with major partners. But now, in the quiet solitude of rural Georgia, he felt helpless in the face of something as simple as changing a tire. He looked around. No cars passing by, no phone signal, just lush green fields surrounding him. The feeling of isolation and lack grew in his chest. After a few unsuccessful attempts to call for emergency services with no response, he sat there, feeling the slow passage of time. At that moment, in the distance, David saw a small figure approaching. A boy, about 13 or 14 years old, wearing a faded t-shirt and old shoes, walking barefoot along the dirt road. The boy looked at the car, then up at David with a determined expression, as if this was his mission. "Need some help, sir?" the boy asked, his tone calm and confident, making David feel a little strange. David hadn't expected a boy like this to approach a stranger in a situation like this. But something in the way the boy looked at him made David feel a sense of relief. "My tire's flat. I can't get a signal, and I don't know what to do," David replied, feeling a bit passive. The boy smiled, his eyes lighting up as if this was something he was familiar with. "I can help you," he said, then squatted down to inspect the tire. "Do you have a spare?" David pointed to the trunk, smiling, touched, but also a little embarrassed. "Yes, but I don't know how to do it." He didn't expect to need help from a boy. The boy quickly opened the trunk, took out the tire-changing tools, and began removing the old tire and replacing it with the spare, with no hesitation. Each motion was precise and quick, as if he had done this many times before. David stood watching, a sense of astonishment spreading inside him. The boy didn't need any instructions or words. His confidence and patience made David feel like he was witnessing something truly special, a selfless act of help without any expectation of receiving something in return. When the job was done, the boy wiped his hands on his jeans, stood up, and smiled contentedly. "All done, sir," he said simply, a small smile appearing on his youthful face. David, still stunned by the boy's actions, took money from his wallet and extended it towards him. "Thank you so much." "This is a small gift for you," he said, but the boy simply shook his head, a polite gesture. "No need, sir. Just helping," the boy replied, then turned and began walking down the road ahead. David stood there, holding the money, surprised and swept up in a strange feeling. The boy had helped him without asking for anything. David put his hand in his pocket, sliding the money back into his wallet, feeling a strange emptiness. The boy faded into the distance in the rearview mirror, and the image lingered in David's mind. For the rest of the drive, nothing but the boy's smile and determined gaze kept circling in David's thoughts, making him feel something shift inside himself. He couldn't explain it, but there was an emotion he had never experienced before, a mix of deep gratitude, surprise, and a hint of shame. That night, in his luxurious mansion, David couldn't stop thinking about Elijah and the selfless act of kindness the boy had shown him. Everything in the vast house, with its expensive paintings and elegant furnishings, suddenly felt cold and devoid of true happiness. The boy hadn't just changed his tire. He had brought to David a lesson in kindness and simplicity. It was a feeling he had never experienced in his life, a feeling that money and power couldn't buy. David began reflecting on himself, on what he had lost in his quest for success. Growing up in a less fortunate family, he had learned values such as hard work and perseverance. But as he achieved great things, he gradually distanced himself from those values, swept up in the materialistic world of deals and contracts. He realized that in a life full of fame and abundance, he had lost humility and kindness, the very things Elijah had shown so naturally. The gratitude and obsession with Elijah's actions kept David from being able to let it go. He decided to find the boy, not just to thank him, but to learn from him a way of life David felt he had long abandoned. He wondered if Elijah's family had anything to do with this story. What had made Elijah such a kind boy when David, with everything he had, lacked the simplicity and humanity that Elijah embodied? The next morning, without hesitation, David drove to the mountainous region of Georgia, where dirt roads and simple houses stood. He stopped at a few gas stations and small cafes, asking locals about a boy named Elijah. After hours of searching, an elderly woman at a cafe finally pointed him toward a small house in Harlan, an hour's drive away. This town, nestled in the hills, wasn't well known and appeared to see little traffic. When David arrived in Harlan, he felt a clear contrast. There was no hustle or bustle like the places he was accustomed to. The small homes were built simply, the streets quiet, with few vehicles passing by. A sense of peace and simplicity enveloped the place, making David feel like he had stepped into another world. David asked around about Elijah and was directed to a modest house at the end of a road. The house wasn't large, but it was neat and filled with signs of a close-knit family. The windows were covered with old fabric curtains, hand-drawn pictures adorned the walls, and the furniture, though worn, was well cared for. David stopped his car, gazing at the house carefully. He felt a strange surprise, as if he were standing in front of a world he had never truly understood. When David knocked on the door, a woman in her 40s opened it. She looked at him with curious yet slightly cautious eyes. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp. David smiled, a bit hesitant. "Hello, I'm David Thomas. I met your son, Elijah, yesterday. He helped me change my tire, and I wanted to thank him." He felt a little awkward standing before such a humble mother while wearing his expensive suit. The woman smiled faintly, her expression softening. "That's Elijah. He always helps others when he can. Even though we don't have much, he always tries to do the right thing." She opened the door wider and invited David in. "Come in. Elijah is out back. If you don't mind, you can wait here." David stepped into the house, feeling the warmth radiating from every corner. Though everything appeared old and simple, there was a sense of peace in this space that he had never found elsewhere. The family picture on the wall, the simple objects full of meaning, they all reflected a life completely different from anything David had known. After a short wait, the woman led him to the backyard. Elijah, the boy David had been searching for all morning, was busy repairing a broken section of the fence. The boy turned around, his eyes lighting up as he recognized David. "Hello, sir," Elijah said, smiling slightly. "You've come to find me again?" David smiled, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I just wanted to thank you again for helping me yesterday. It's something that very few people would do. I thought about you all night and decided to come here to thank you." David looked into Elijah's eyes, sensing the sincerity in his words. Elijah shrugged lightly, his expression calm. "It's no big deal, sir. I was just helping." He continued fixing the fence, showing no sign of arrogance or desire for praise. David stood there for a moment, feeling like he wasn't the one who should be thanked. "You really are a special person," David said, his voice full of admiration. "No one does what you did. With kindness like that, you must have a very special family." Elijah looked up, smiling gently. "My mom works hard. I just try to help her." Elijah's simple answer left David speechless. The boy had nothing, yet he had everything that David felt he lacked: humility, kindness, and self-confidence, without relying on anything external. David stood there, staring at Elijah, feeling a profound shift in his soul. The boy, with his simplicity, had made David feel as though he had just been awakened. Throughout his life, David had chased everything money could offer, yet he had never experienced the simple joy that Elijah had just shown him. Just the feelings of gratitude, confusion, and a hint of shame intertwined, making it impossible for him to stop here. He couldn't let Elijah and his family live in such humble conditions any longer. After standing still for a long time, David finally spoke. "I want to do something for you and your family." His voice was full of sincerity. Elijah looked at him, his eyes wide, but then he shook his head. "We're fine, sir. My mom and I are used to this kind of life." David stepped closer, but without insisting. "It's not about whether you need help. It's about doing the right thing. You've taught me a big lesson, and I can't let you live like this, not even for one more day." Elijah remained silent, looking down at the ground for a moment, then met David's gaze again. He could sense the sincerity in David's eyes, but still couldn't understand why David felt the need to help them. Elijah's mother, from a distance, was watching them with a mixture of skepticism and emotion. She knew David was speaking from the heart, but she didn't want to trouble anyone, especially someone as wealthy as him. David noticed this and turned to look at her. "I don't want to bother you. I just want to do what's right. Helping isn't about having too much. It's because your family taught me a lesson about kindness and humility." Elijah's mother looked at David, her expression softening. "What can you do to help us?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to observe their modest home. The fence was old and patched together, the roof needed repair, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. Despite its simplicity, the place held a quiet beauty, a testament to resilience and the love between the family. David knew this was where he could do something meaningful. "We'll fix your house," David said, his tone firm. "We'll replace the roof, rebuild the fence, and restore the garden. I want you to have a home that's strong and warm, just like you deserve." Elijah and his mother exchanged a stunned look. She shook her head, surprised by David's offer. "You don't have to do that. We're fine, really." David stood firm. "No, I want to do this. This is how I can thank your family and Elijah. And it's also how I can repay what you've done for me." This wasn't just a simple act of kindness. It was a change in how David viewed life, and he felt that he needed to do what was right. He didn't want to be just another wealthy person detached from the real values of life. He wanted to make a lasting difference. The next day, trucks and construction workers began arriving at Elijah's house. The repair team got to work, replacing the roof, fixing the walls, and improving the yard. Elijah's mother and the boy stood there, still unable to believe that this help was real. They watched everything change before their eyes, but they couldn't bring themselves to fully believe that someone would offer such selfless assistance. Although Elijah was invited to take a break, he couldn't tear his eyes away from the construction site. He was deeply curious about the work the workers were doing, asking them questions about tools, materials, and how they carried out their tasks. One of the workers, a man named Joe, noticed Elijah's interest and decided to teach him how to measure and use some basic tools. Elijah's eyes lit up, and he began to grow more and more curious about the construction trade, something he had never considered before. David watched from a distance, feeling a deep joy in his heart. The boy wasn't just fascinated by the work, he had discovered a new passion. Even though Elijah's family had little, David realized that this boy, with his dignity and curiosity, would never let himself be trapped in poverty. Over the following weeks, Elijah's family watched their home undergo a complete transformation. The walls were repainted, the roof was stronger, and the yard was renovated with a new play area for Elijah. The boy didn't just help clean up and tend to the yard. He also learned more about construction from the workers. As time passed, Elijah grew more confident, working alongside the crew, and gradually he began to imagine his future career, a building engineer. Every day he grew more enamored with the craftsmanship, learning from those around him and striving to improve his skills. When everything was finished, Elijah's family looked at their newly renovated home with pride and happiness. Elijah's mother could no longer hold back her tears.
"You've changed our lives," she said to David, her voice choking with emotion. "Thank you so much." David simply smiled, his eyes brighter than ever before. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You've taught me the true meaning of sharing and compassion. You've not only given me a house, but you've given me a family." In the end, Elijah's house was not only rebuilt, but his and his family's lives were reborn. The roof was stronger, the yard more spacious, and a new atmosphere filled the space. But for David, the greatest change wasn't in the new walls or the playground. It was the transformation within his own soul. Standing on the new porch of the house, looking out at the colorful garden, David felt as though he had found a part of life he had long lost. He looked into Elijah's eyes, the boy who had now become a powerful inspiration to him. Elijah didn't need wealth or material possessions. He only needed sincerity, perseverance, and an open heart. He had taught David about the value of giving without expecting anything in return, about helping others unconditionally. It was a priceless lesson that David had never imagined he would learn, that the best things in life are not what we have, but what we give. Elijah had made David realize that, despite having everything, there was nothing more precious than true kindness and a real connection with others. And so, through the small actions of Elijah, David had found himself again. He decided to continue visiting Harlan, not out of charity, but because he had found a community he truly wanted to be a part of. Week after week, he returned to visit Elijah and his family, not just to maintain a relationship, but to learn from them. He also helped Elijah pursue his dream of becoming a building engineer, opening up opportunities for him in the future. Elijah and David's story proves that life isn't always about wealth and fame. It's the giving, kindness, and genuine connections that truly hold value. If this story has touched your heart, share it with others so we can create a world filled with compassion. Leave your thoughts below this video and share any kind acts you've experienced or things you think could change someone else's life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. We can make a difference, not just with grand gestures, but with small, sincere actions full of love. Let's spread positive values and start life-changing conversations together. Thank you for being part of this story. Share it with friends and family so we can build a strong, compassionate community together.